Do you wish you had more joy in your life? That is what this 4-week Bible study through the Book of Philippians is all about. It's entitled The Joy of Christian Living. Last week we focused on the Philippian church. This week we shift into the heart of how we live out our faith. Honestly, it's both encouraging and a little challenging at the same time. Hi, I'm Sandy from the creatorsclassroom.com, Growing in Joy Women's Bible Study Group. She Finds Hope and Diving Deeper in the Bible, a women's Bible study group, all on Facebook. This study was written by Darlene Schott from the Time Warp Wife, and it's a beautiful, thoughtful guide that helps us slow down, dig deeper, and really apply God's Word to our everyday lives. There is a free study guide that you can download, or you can also purchase an actual book that is from Darlene Schott at the Time Warp Wife. The directions for getting this is in the comments below. This week we started in Philippians 2, 1 through 11, where Paul calls us to think differently, to actually have the mindset of Christ. And that's actually a big challenge. Because when you look at Jesus, what stands out most is his humility. He had every right to position, honor, and recognition, and yet he chose to serve. He chose to lower himself. He chose obedience. And Paul is saying this is our example to follow. Not just in what we believe, but in how we treat people, how we respond, how we live day to day. It naturally leads to the question, why does humility matter so much in the life of a believer? And I think part of the answer is this: humility keeps us aligned with truth. It reminds us that everything we have, everything we are, comes from God, and it shifts our focus off ourselves and onto others. But if we're honest, that isn't always easy. Most of us are okay with serving as long as it fits our preferences, our timing, or what feels comfortable. But serving like Jesus, that's different. That kind of service is sacrificial. It's quiet sometimes. It doesn't always get noticed or appreciated. And it often asks us to lay down our own interests for the sake of someone else. Then midweek, as we move further into chapter 2, we saw that contrast even more clearly. Paul talks about living in a way that stands out, being people who reflect something different in a world that often focuses on self. And then he points to examples of people who were actually living this out, not perfectly, but faithfully. Because at the end of the day, this kind of life isn't about performance, it's about transformation. And that leads us into chapter 3. This part is so powerful because Paul begins to talk about identity. He basically lays out his resume, all of the things that, from a worldly or religious perspective, would make him look impressive. And then he says, none of it compares, none of it defines him anymore. What matters most is knowing Jesus, not achievements, not status, not what others think, just Jesus. And that's such a needed reminder because it's so easy to build our identity on what we've done, what we've been through, or how we've been perceived. But Paul redirects all of that and says, the only thing that truly matters is a relationship with Jesus. And then comes a deeper question about the Pharisees, not just who they were historically, but how they lived. They were outwardly religious, but often inwardly focused on rules, appearances, and control. There was a disconnect between what they showed and what was actually going on in their hearts. And if we're willing to be honest, we have to ask ourselves, do we ever focus more on looking like we have it all together than actually growing? Do we ever shift into routine instead of relationship? This week really invites us to examine that, not in a heavy or condemning way, but in an honest, heart check kind of way. Because the goal isn't perfection, it's becoming more like Jesus. So, as you reflect on this week, here are a couple of things to think about. Where might God be inviting you to walk in deeper humility? And secondly, is there anything you've been holding on to, an identity, an achievement, or an image that might be getting in the way of simply knowing Jesus more? Next week, we'll wrap up our study as we move into the end of chapter 3 and chapter 4, where Paul brings everything together with some really practical and encouraging truths. I hope you'll join me then. And while you're at it, do all the things that we do on social media: like, subscribe, and share. And I'll see you next time in week 4. Bye bye.